I was sipping champagne, pretending to listen to a donor drone on about tax loopholes when I saw him. Ethan, and like a shadow clinging to his side, his mother Eleanor. They were making a beeline for me, a desperate glint in their eyes that I recognized even from across the room. Their family business, a legacy built on whispers and backroom deals, was failing. They needed an investor. They needed me. As they drew closer, Eleanor leaned towards Ethan, her voice a low hiss, but the acoustics in this place carried. "She's our only hope, Ethan. Don't mess this up. She's impressionable, always was." The words, identical to the ones she'd used 5 years ago to convince him I wasn't good enough, struck me like a physical blow. A familiar ache throbbed in my chest, a ghost of the girl I used to be. But I kept my smile perfectly in place, my spine straight. I watched Ethan's eyes, saw the flicker of unease, then the dawning horror as he realized I'd heard. He knew, in that instant, that the broken, pliable girl he'd abandoned was gone. "Eleanor, Ethan," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "Such a surprise to see you both." I extended a hand, first to her, then to him, my touch deliberately brief. "If you'll excuse me," I murmured, withdrawing my hand before Ethan could even fully grasp it. "I see someone I simply must speak to." I turned, a polite but dismissive smile on my lips, and walked away, leaving Ethan stammering, his plea dying on his lips. The power, finally, was mine. I would decide if and when we ever spoke again. 5 years, it felt like a lifetime ago, yet the memory was as sharp as broken glass. Ethan had proposed in the tiny walled garden of our favorite Italian restaurant. The late spring air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle, and the champagne bubbles tickled my nose as I laughed, my heart overflowing. He was on one knee, the velvet box open, a simple diamond winking in the twilight. He looked nervous, his usual confident charm replaced with a vulnerability that I found utterly endearing. "Will you, Amelia? Will you marry me?" His voice was husky, and for a fleeting second, I saw a shadow of doubt in his eyes, a hesitation that I dismissed as pre-wedding jitters. "Yes," I'd breathed, tears welling. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. "We should tell my family," I'd said, already picturing their happy faces, imagining Christmases and summer barbecues, a life intertwined. Ethan's smile tightened. "Of course," he said, a little too quickly. "Soon. Let's enjoy this moment, just us, for a little while." That should have been my first clue. His reluctance wasn't about savoring the moment. It was about delaying the inevitable storm. The first dinner at the Beaumont family estate was an experience. The house itself was magnificent, old money dripping from every antique and oil painting, but the atmosphere was as cold as the marble floors. Eleanor, Ethan's mother, was a woman sculpted from ice, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. She appraised me over the rim of her wineglass, her gaze lingering on my dress too simple, my jewelry too modest, my very presence too common. Ethan's father, a portly man with a booming laugh that didn't quite mask his dismissive air, barely acknowledged me beyond a cursory nod. Then there was Charlotte, Ethan's younger sister. She was all sweetness and light on the surface, but her words were laced with a subtle venom. "Oh, Amelia, it's so brave of you to wear that color," she'd cooed, her eyes flicking over my department store dress. "And you come from such a humble background, don't you? It must be quite overwhelming, all of this." The Ethan who sat beside me at that polished mahogany table was a stranger. He laughed a little too loudly at his father's jokes, his eyes constantly seeking his mother's approval. When Charlotte made her little digs, he'd offer a weak smile, sometimes even a chuckle, as if I were in on some private joke. He became pliant, eager, a reflection of their expectations. I watched him, a knot tightening in my stomach. Where was the man I loved, the man who'd held my hand in that quiet garden and promised me forever? The betrayals didn't stop at the family dinner table. They seeped into my everyday life, carried by the one person I'd trusted implicitly, Mia, my best friend, the one who'd introduced me to Ethan. We worked at the same marketing firm, though I was a junior associate and she was a team lead. Suddenly, my projects were hitting snags. Deadlines were being missed, not by my own doing, but because crucial information Mia was supposed to provide was always delayed or misplaced. A promotion I'd been on track for was suddenly under review. I remember walking past a conference room late one afternoon. The door was slightly ajar. I heard Mia's voice, honeyed and conspiratorial. "Don't worry, Mrs. Beaumont. I'm handling it. Amelia won't be a problem for much longer. She's ambitious, yes, but a little out of her depth, if you know what I mean." My blood ran cold. Mrs. Beaumont? Eleanor. My best friend was colluding with Ethan's mother to undermine me, not just personally, but professionally. The pieces clicked into place, a sickening mosaic of deceit. The final, carefully orchestrated act of their campaign to break me came in the form of a family weekend at their lake house. It was presented as a chance for us all to bond, but I knew it was a trap. Charlotte, with a saccharine smile, seemed to delight in creating situations designed to make me look foolish or uncultured. She'd ask me obscure questions about art history at dinner, knowing I'd studied business. She'd accidentally spill wine on my only nice blouse just before guests arrived. Eleanor floated through the weekend, her disapproval a constant, silent hum. She'd question our wedding plans, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Are you sure you want such a large wedding, Amelia? Perhaps something simpler would be more appropriate given your circumstances." Ethan's boss, Marcus Thorne, a man whose company was a major client of the Beaumont family business and a close family friend, was also there. He treated me with a patronizing amusement, making condescending remarks about my career aspirations. "Marketing, is it? Quaint. Stick to planning parties, dear." Ethan, bless his cowardly heart, just stood by, offering placating smiles and weak defenses that only highlighted my isolation. He was so desperate for their approval, so terrified of their disappointment, that he was willing to let them tear me apart piece by piece. The breaking point, the moment I knew it was truly over, came late one night. I couldn't sleep. The tension in the house was suffocating. I padded downstairs for a glass of water and heard voices from the study, Ethan and his mother. Her tone was sharp, cutting. "Your inheritance, Ethan. Your position in the company. Do you think your grandfather would approve of you marrying so far beneath us? This girl, this Amelia. She's not one of us. You need to handle it." I pressed myself against the cold wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. Handle it. He wasn't going to defend me. He wasn't going to choose me. He was going to handle me. I didn't wait to hear his reply. I didn't need to. I retreated, silent as a ghost, the taste of betrayal bitter on my tongue. The question wasn't whether he would break my heart. This question was how I would respond when he did. The days that followed the lake house incident were a slow, agonizing unraveling. Ethan grew distant, his excuses about wedding planning becoming more frequent, more elaborate. He was swamped at work, dealing with family matters, just needed some space. The warmth we'd shared, the easy intimacy, evaporated, replaced by a chilling formality. He avoided my calls, his texts were perfunctory. The ring on my finger felt heavier each day, a beautiful shackle. The final, brutal confirmation of what I already knew in my gut came on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd decided to treat myself to lunch at a little cafe near my office, a small act of defiance against the gloom that had settled over me. And there they were, seated at a sun-dappled table by the window. Mia and Charlotte. Their heads were bent together, conspiratorial laughter bubbling between them. I couldn't hear every word, but snippets drifted over. They'll never fit in. Ethan's finally seeing sense. So much better for the family. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mia, my supposed best friend, sharing a cozy lunch with the sister who'd made it her mission to humiliate me. The air in the cafe suddenly felt thick, unbreathable. I could taste metal in my mouth, the sharp tang of blood from where I'd bitten the inside of my cheek to keep from screaming, from crying, from making a scene. I wanted to march over there, to confront them, to unleash the torrent of hurt and anger that was choking me. But a new, cold resolve was crystallizing within me. Confrontation was what they expected. It was what the old Amelia would have done. The new Amelia had other plans. Instead of storming out, I calmly paid my bill and walked back to the office. The image of their laughing faces burned into my mind. That afternoon, I didn't cry. I didn't wallow. I started plotting. My first call was to a headhunter. Marcus Thorne, Ethan's boss, had made his disdain for me clear. Fine. I'd find a position with his biggest competitor. The next day, I enrolled in evening business courses at the local university advanced finance corporate strategy negotiation. If they thought I was out of my depth, I'd learn to swim with sharks. To fund my new wardrobe, a power suit for interviews, not a simple dress for family dinners. I sold the delicate gold locket my grandmother had left me. It was the most meaningful piece of jewelry I owned, a tangible link to a past filled with unconditional love. As I handed it over to the jeweler, a sharp pang of loss shot through me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a steely determination. This was an investment in my future, a future they wouldn't control. The emotional toll was immense. I went through the motions with Ethan, a hollow shell of the woman I'd been. I smiled, I listened, I played the part of the oblivious fiancé, all while secretly dismantling the life we were supposed to build together and forging a new one, brick by painful brick. The breakup ambush, when it finally came, was as cruelly orchestrated as I'd expected. Ethan invited me to another family dinner at the estate. The atmosphere was charged, a smug satisfaction radiating from Eleanor and Charlotte. Even Ethan's father seemed more jovial than usual. Ethan, looking pale and drawn, picked at his food, avoiding my gaze. Then, dessert was served and he cleared his throat. "Amelia," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk." He launched into a carefully rehearsed speech about how we'd grown apart, how our paths were diverging, how this was for the best. It was all bullshit, every word a calculated lie designed to absolve him of responsibility. I listened, my face a mask of carefully constructed devastation. I let a few tears escape, playing the part of the heartbroken fiancé to perfection. Eleanor, ever the gracious victor, offered her condolences. "My dear Amelia," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We're all so sorry it's come to this. Perhaps this will help with your situation." She slid a check across the table. A generous sum, hush money, an unspoken agreement. Take the money and disappear quietly. Attached to the check was a discreetly worded document that looked suspiciously like a non-disclosure agreement. I looked at the check, then at their expectant faces. I let another tear roll down my cheek. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "You're all so kind." As I dabbed at my eyes, I discreetly slipped my new, professionally printed business card to the young waiter who had been refilling our water glasses, the one who'd witnessed the entire charade with wide, sympathetic eyes. His name tag read Daniel. The next morning, my lawyer, a sharp-witted woman I'd found through my new business contacts, was on the phone. Daniel, the waiter, had been more than happy to provide a signed, notarized statement detailing the Beaumont family's behavior, the public humiliation, the condescending gift. My lawyer drafted a letter coolly rejecting Eleanor's generous offer and including a thinly veiled warning about potential legal repercussions for harassment and defamation of character should they attempt any further contact or spread any malicious rumors. We attached a copy of Daniel's statement. The first counterattack was swift and satisfying. Within hours of the letter being couriered to the Beaumont estate, my phone started ringing. Ethan. His voice was frantic, laced with panic. "Amelia, what have you done? My mother is furious. You can't do this." Then came calls from Charlotte, her usual snide tone replaced with a shrill hysteria. Even Ethan's father left a blustering, vaguely threatening voicemail. They were worried. Not about my feelings, of course, but about the potential scandal, the damage to their precious family name. I let their calls go to voicemail, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips as I packed the last of my belongings into boxes. The apartment we'd once shared, filled with dreams that had turned to dust, felt strangely liberating as I stripped it bare of my presence. The old Amelia was gone. The new Amelia was just getting started. 2 years, 2 years of relentless hard work, late nights, and unwavering focus. I didn't just survive, I thrived. The position I'd taken at the rival company, a direct competitor to Marcus Thorne's firm and by extension, the Beaumont's interests, had been a stepping stone. I climbed the ladder with a speed that surprised everyone, including myself. My new office wasn't a cramped cubicle. It was a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. A city that now felt full of promise, not painful memories. Then, one afternoon, Mia appeared at my office door. She looked different. The confidence she used to wear like a second skin was gone, replaced by a hesitant, almost nervous energy. She carried a ridiculously oversized bouquet of lilies, my favorite, a detail she'd remembered. "Amelia," she said, her voice soft, tentative. "Can we talk?" She claimed she wanted to reconcile, to apologize for her past actions. She spun a tale of being pressured by Eleanor, of feeling trapped. I listened, my expression carefully neutral, though inside a warning bell was clanging. Her apology felt hollow, her eyes shifty. She asked a lot of questions, too many questions, about my current projects, about the company's strategies, about my team. It wasn't a reconciliation, it was a fishing expedition for Ethan's family. My suspicions were confirmed a few days later. We'd had a strained, awkward coffee, during which Mia had excused herself to use the restroom. She'd left her handbag on the chair, call it intuition, call it paranoia, but something compelled me to glance inside. Tucked into a side pocket was a tiny, almost invisible spy camera pen, and her phone, when I risked a quick look, showed recently accessed photos, blurry images of confidential documents from my desk taken during her bathroom break. The betrayal this time was colder, more calculated. It wasn't just a personal slight, it was corporate espionage. Eleanor Beaumont was still pulling the strings, using Mia as her puppet. And Marcus Thorne, I had no doubt, was involved, likely orchestrating a professional harassment campaign to discredit me or steal valuable intel. They hadn't learned their lesson. They still underestimated me. This time, there would be no emotional outburst, no immediate confrontation. I was playing a different game now. I met with our company's head of security, a formidable ex-military man named Carter. I laid out my suspicions, showed him the evidence I'd discreetly gathered, copies of Mia's poorly taken photos, security footage of her overly long bathroom break. Carter, to his credit, took it seriously. We began to build a case, methodically, silently. While Carter's team monitored Mia's communications and installed discreet surveillance, I reached out to a few contacts I'd made, ethical employees still working at Ethan's family company, individuals who were growing increasingly uncomfortable with the Beaumont's cutthroat business practices and questionable ethics. They were hesitant at first, but the promise of anonymity and the chance to expose the rot from within was a powerful motivator. Information trickled in. Rumors of financial irregularities, shady deals, a pattern of unethical behavior that went far beyond trying to sabotage an ex-fiancé. I appeared oblivious, friendly even, during my carefully orchestrated, infrequent interactions with Mia, all while the net was slowly tightening around her. The exposure came during a carefully planned strategy meeting I'd invited Mia to, knowing she wouldn't be able to resist the lure of potentially valuable information. I'd deliberately left a folder of highly confidential, but ultimately insignificant documents on the table. As predicted, Mia excused herself again. This time, Carter and his team were waiting. They caught her red-handed, attempting to photograph the documents. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Our CEO, a man with a flair for the dramatic and a deep-seated loathing for Marcus Thorne, held a press conference the very next day. He didn't name me as the source, protecting my anonymity, but he publicly announced a brazen attempt at corporate espionage by a nameless competitor, detailing Mia's actions and hinting at a larger, more insidious campaign. He didn't need to name names. The industry was small, the gossip mill efficient. Within hours, everyone knew who he was talking about. The Beaumont family business stock, already struggling, took a nosedive. Marcus Thorne's reputation was in tatters. Then came the desperate outreach. Ethan was the first to call, his voice a jumbled mess of apologies and excuses. He claimed he knew nothing about Mia, nothing about the espionage. He begged to see me, to explain, to make things right. Emails flooded my inbox, filled with professions of undying love and desperate pleas for forgiveness. Flowers arrived at my office daily, a funereal parade of roses and lilies. Mia, predictably, sent a tearful, rambling message, claiming Eleanor had threatened her, forced her into it. The most audacious attempt came from Charlotte. She actually showed up at my office unannounced, demanding to see me. She caused such a scene in the lobby, screeching about family honor and misunderstandings, that security had to physically remove her. I watched from my office window as she was escorted out, a pathetic, flailing figure. It was a far cry from the smug, condescending woman who'd tormented me at the lake house. As the dust began to settle, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. It was from a name I didn't recognize, but the subject line was intriguing. An offer you might find interesting. I almost deleted it, dismissing it as another desperate attempt from the Beaumont camp. But something made me pause, a flicker of curiosity. I opened it. It was an invitation, not a plea. An invitation that would change everything. Simultaneously, I started noticing oddities. Hang-up calls to my private line. A strange car parked across the street from my apartment building for several nights in a row. Then, a former colleague, someone I dated briefly years ago, long before Ethan called me, sounding flustered. Amelia, I don't know how to tell you this, but some private investigator called me, asking all sorts of questions about you. Really personal stuff. Said he was working for the Beaumont family. They were digging into my past, contacting exes, friends, anyone who might have a sliver of information they could twist, looking for leverage, for any dirt they could use to smear my reputation. The desperation was palpable and frankly pathetic. Instead of launching a direct counteroffensive, which they clearly expected, I decided on a more strategic approach. Mr. Harrison, while supportive, was a businessman first and foremost. A lucrative acquisition offer was tempting, regardless of the underlying motives. I needed a more powerful ally. I arranged a meeting with Alastair Finch, the semi-retired founder of our company. He was a legend in the industry, a shrewd, old-school businessman who had built his empire from the ground up. His study was a sanctuary of old-world charm, filled with the scent of leather-bound books, aged wood, and fine brandy. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Alistair, a man with eyes that missed nothing, listened intently as I laid out the Beaumont's tactics, presenting the evidence of their corporate espionage attempts, the acquisition offer, the private investigator. I didn't whine or plead. I presented facts calmly and professionally. When I finished, a slow, knowing smile spread across Alistair's face. Arthur Beaumont, he rumbled, swirling the amber liquid in his snifter. A leopard rarely changes its spots. He then proceeded to tell me a story, a tale of a business deal gone sour decades earlier, a betrayal by Arthur's father, Ethan's grandfather, that had cost Alistair dearly. He'd been waiting a long time, he said, for an opportunity to settle that old score. My predicament, it seemed, had provided him with the perfect opening. Alastair Finch became more than just an ally. He became my mentor. He saw in me a reflection of his own tenacity, his own refusal to be beaten. He began grooming me, not just for my current role, but for something much bigger. He introduced me to his extensive network of influential contacts, bankers, lawyers, CEOs, people who could open doors or, more importantly, quietly close them on the Beaumonts. The family's acquisition attempt stalled, mysteriously hitting bureaucratic roadblocks and financial snags that Arthur couldn't comprehend. There were no dramatic confrontations, no public accusations, just a slow, silent squeeze. I continued to excel in my role, seemingly unaffected by the drama swirling around me, all while powerful forces moved behind the scenes, orchestrated by my new mentor. The culmination of Alistair's machinations and my own hard work came 6 months later. I was named the youngest vice president in the company's history. The announcement was made at a lavish industry gala. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. As I stood on the podium, accepting the award, I saw Ethan in the crowd. He was watching me, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. Later, he approached me, his voice earnest. Amelia, I always knew you were capable of great things. I always believed in you. The hypocrisy was almost laughable. Marcus Thorne, looking significantly less smug than usual, also cornered me, offering a veiled job proposal at his now struggling firm, a desperate attempt to poach me to regain some semblance of credibility. And Eleanor? She sent an ostentatiously expensive crystal vase to my office the next day, accompanied by a handwritten note suggesting we let bygones be bygones and start fresh, as if years of calculated cruelty could be erased by a trinket and a few pretty words. I returned the vase with a polite, formal note, thanking her for the thought, but stating that I preferred to focus on the future. I declined Marcus's offer with a cool, professional email, subtly referencing the unfortunate corporate espionage incident and wishing him well in rebuilding his company's reputation. Ethan caught up with me a few weeks later at another industry event. He looked broken. The confidence, the arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw desperation. "Amelia, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I should have chosen you. I've always loved you. It was my family, the pressure. I was weak." He reached for my hand. I looked at him, at the man I had once loved so fiercely, the man who had shattered my world, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a vast, empty space where my love for him used to be. I pulled my hand away. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm, steady. "You made your choice a long time ago." And then, as he stood there, his face crumbling, I turned and walked away, mid-sentence, without a backward glance. A few days later, an elegant, cream-colored envelope arrived at my office. It was thick, expensive cardstock, the calligraphy exquisite. There was no return address, no sender's name, just my name, beautifully inscribed. Inside was a single embossed card, an invitation to an exclusive investment opportunity presentation. The location was one of the most prestigious addresses in the financial district. My suspicions were immediately aroused, but so was my curiosity. This felt different from the Beaumont's usual clumsy tactics. This felt significant. The invitation was an enigma, a beautifully crafted lure. Part of me screamed trap, another desperate Beaumont ploy. But the quality, the understated elegance, the sheer audacity of the anonymous sender. It didn't fit their usual MO curiosity, that persistent human failing won out. I would go, but I would go prepared. I chose my dress with the care of a general selecting armor, a sleek, midnight blue sheath by a rising designer, understated, yet undeniably powerful. My heels were sharp, my makeup flawless, my demeanor coolly professional. If this was another battle, I was ready. The address led me to a discreet, unmarked building in the heart of the financial district. Inside, it was all hushed tones, polished mahogany, and an air of quiet, immense wealth. I was escorted to a large boardroom where a select group of individuals were already gathered. These weren't the flashy, new money types I'd encountered at charity galas. These were the quiet titans of industry, the old money elite, the kind of people who moved markets with a single phone call. Alistair Finch was there, a subtle nod my way, but he wasn't the one leading the proceedings. At the head of the long, polished table sat a man I vaguely recognized from industry photographs, Alistair's former business partner, a man named Julian Vance, long since retired, or so everyone thought. He had an aura of quiet authority, his eyes sharp and intelligent despite his advanced years. He began to speak, his voice a low, cultured rumble. He explained that he and Alistair had been discreetly watching my career for some time, impressed by my resilience, my strategic mind, my ethical compass. He said they had been waiting for the right candidate, the right opportunity for a very specific, very ambitious project. Then he dropped the bombshell. He and Alistair, through a consortium of carefully chosen investors, the very people in this room, had been slowly, methodically, and secretly planning the acquisition of Beaumont Consolidated, Ethan's family business. Not to dismantle it, he explained, but to restructure it, to strip away the rot and rebuild it on a foundation of integrity and modern business practices. My jaw nearly hit the expensive mahogany, but the biggest revelation was yet to come. Julian Vance leaned forward, his gaze fixed on mine. "Amelia," he said, his voice gentle but firm. There's something you need to know about your connection to Beaumont Consolidated. Something your family, perhaps for their own reasons, never told you. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Your maternal grandfather, a man named Thomas Albright, was the original co-founder of this company, alongside Ethan's grandfather, Howard Beaumont. The room started to spin. My grandfather? I barely remembered him. He'd passed away when I was very young. My mother rarely spoke of him, or her family's past. It was a closed chapter, shrouded in a vague sadness I'd never understood. Julian continued, his voice painting a picture of a bitter betrayal. Thomas Albright, a brilliant innovator but a less savvy businessman, had been systematically forced out of his own company by Howard Beaumont through a series of ruthless legal maneuvers and financial manipulations, left with almost nothing while Howard built an empire on his stolen legacy. My talent, my drive, my affinity for this industry, it wasn't a coincidence. It was in my blood. A heritage I never knew I possessed. The champagne I'd sipped earlier, the symbol of my success, suddenly tasted bitter. The irony was almost too much to bear. The family who had deemed me not good enough, who had tried to crush me because of my humble background, had, in fact, stolen their entire legacy from mine. The power shift in that room was palpable. Julian Vance, on behalf of the investment consortium, formally offered me a controlling interest in the acquisition deal. Not just a seat at the table, but the head of the table. The position to determine the future of Beaumont Consolidated, the company my grandfather had helped build, the company that bore the name of the family who had tried to destroy me. Alistair explained that this had been their endgame all along. My professional rise, the challenges I'd faced and overcome, had been a test of my character, my ethics, my resilience. They hadn't just been mentoring me. They'd been preparing me for this very moment. Ethan's family, in their arrogance, had investigated my present, trying to find dirt, but they'd never bothered to look deep enough into my past. Never dreaming that the woman they so casually dismissed held the key to their undoing and their salvation. My mind reeled. Revenge. It was right there, gift-wrapped and offered on a silver platter. I could dismantle Beaumont Consolidated piece by piece, scatter the Beaumonts to the wind, and no one would blame me. The desire was a hot, intoxicating pulse in my veins. But then, I looked at Alistair, at Julian, at the expectant faces around the table. They hadn't brought me here for petty revenge. They'd brought me here for something bigger, responsibility, legacy, the chance to build something better. I took a deep breath, the initial fiery desire for vengeance cooling into a steely resolve. I accept, I said, my voice clear and strong. But we do this ethically. We rebuild. We honor the true legacy of this company, the one my grandfather envisioned. A murmur of approval went around the table. Julian Vance smiled. We knew you'd make the right choice, Amelia. He then informed me that the press announcement was scheduled for the following morning. The Beaumonts had no idea what was about to hit them. I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring past my window. My life had just been irrevocably altered. As I pulled up to my apartment building, my headlights illuminated a figure standing by my front door, drenched by a sudden downpour that had just begun. Ethan! He was waiting for me. The rain was coming down in sheets now, plastering Ethan's dark hair to his forehead, soaking through his expensive suit. He looked like a drowned rat, a pathetic caricature of the confident man he'd once been. As I stepped out of my car, he rushed forward, fumbling in his pocket. Then, he did something I never thought I'd see. He knelt. Right there on the wet pavement, in the pouring rain, Ethan Beaumont, heir to a crumbling dynasty, got down on one knee, and he held out a ring, not the simple diamond he'd given me before, but a massive, ostentatious rock that screamed desperation. Amelia, he choked out, genuine tears mixing with the raindrops on his face. I was a fool, a coward. I let them control me, but not anymore. I've told them, Amelia. I told them I'm done. I choose you. I've always chosen you in my heart. Please forgive me. Give me another chance. Marry me. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, I promise. The city lights blurred through the rain on my windshield, creating a hazy, almost dreamlike scene. For a moment, a flicker of the old Amelia, the girl who had loved him so completely, stirred within me. But it was just a ghost, a faint echo of a past I no longer inhabited. I looked at him, really looked at his tear-streaked face, his pleading eyes, the ridiculously large diamond. And I felt a profound sense of detachment. I listened, waited until he'd poured out every last desperate word. I acknowledged his pain, his apparent growth. Then, I took a deep breath, the cool night air filling my lungs, washing away the last vestiges of doubt. "Ethan," I said, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through the sound of the rain. "No." A look of stunned disbelief washed over his face. "No," he whispered, as if he couldn't comprehend the word. "No," I repeated, more gently this time. "I appreciate your apology, Ethan. And perhaps you have changed. I hope you have. But I've changed too. The path you forced me onto, the path I had to carve out for myself because of your rejection, it's led me to a place where I no longer need or want what you're offering. I'm grateful for the journey in a strange way. It made me who I am today. But we're different people now. We want different things." I reached out and gently took the ring box from his trembling hand. I closed it and pressed it back into his palm. "I wish you well, Ethan. Truly. I hope you find your own path, separate from your family, separate from me." Then, I turned, walked up the steps to my apartment building, and closed the door, leaving him kneeling in the rain. As the lock clicked shut, I felt an immense weight lift from my shoulders, a sense of peace settling over me like a warm blanket. The news of the acquisition broke the next morning, sending shockwaves through the financial world. Beaumont Consolidated, a pillar of the old guard, taken over by a consortium led by an unknown me. The Beaumont family predictably tried everything: frantic damage control, threats of legal action, desperate appeals to their dwindling network of allies. Charlotte called me, sobbing, a pathetic apology tumbling from her lips. Eleanor, ever audacious, actually appeared at my new office, the CEO's office at the newly restructured Albright Beaumont Corporation, with a ludicrous compromise offer suggesting we could co-manage the company. Marcus Thorne, ever the opportunist, tried to leverage old connections, offering his consulting services. I met each attempt with professional courtesy, compassionate but firm boundaries. There would be no co-managing, no compromises that undermined the new ethical framework we were establishing. The old way of doing business was over. The rebuilding process was challenging, but invigorating. We implemented a complete ethical overhaul of the company, retaining employees who hadn't been complicit in the Beaumont's questionable practices and bringing in fresh talent. I established a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name, Thomas Albright, to support underprivileged students pursuing careers in business and innovation. I even, surprisingly, found myself mending fences with a few genuine colleagues from my early career who had been caught in the crossfire of the Beaumont's machinations, people who, like me, valued integrity over connections. 1 year later, I'm standing on the balcony of a small coastal villa I've rented for a much-needed vacation. The early morning sea breeze is cool on my skin, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. Alistair, now a cherished friend as much as a mentor, is visiting. We're having breakfast, discussing expansion plans for Albright Beaumont, now a thriving, respected entity. He mentions briefly that Ethan has apparently moved to another country, started a small business, and seems to be finding his own way, finally free from his family's shadow. I feel a faint, detached sense of satisfaction for him. The sun is just beginning to crest the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. Its light dances on the waves, a million tiny diamonds scattered across the deep blue. A new beginning. Not one defined by past betrayals or fueled by revenge, but one built on my own terms. A testament to resilience, integrity, and the enduring power of a legacy reclaimed. I smile, a genuine, peaceful smile, and turn back to my coffee, ready for whatever the new day and the future may bring.